Welcome to MRE, your source for apocalyptic Christianity. And just so everyone knows, I still misspell apocalyptic every time I try and write it out. The other word I can never get right on the first try is the word definitely. My brain just does not like that word at all. Now, in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus teaches us what we commonly call the Lord's Prayer. And he warns us against babbling on in prayer and repeating ourselves over and over as if that's the thing that you need to do to have your prayers answered. And it's a short prayer that he prays, but it's full of good information and it's a good model to follow because it's so concise and to the point. And in verse 11, Jesus says this, "Give us today our daily bread." Now, when Ashley and I go grocery shopping, it's about once a week. Maybe one other time during the week if I run out of spinach for my smoothies. But we're blessed with a refrigerator and plenty of food readily available, kind of like most Americans. You and I, we aren't too worried about going hungry today. And we're not too worried about going hungry for the rest of the week, honestly. We never think about starving to death. But that is not typical of most people's experiences throughout the history of the world. See, we take for granted that we can just eat all the time and about any type of food that we want. We are so picky and finicky that we actually don't even drink the free water from our faucet because it tastes funny. So we pay for something that we could get for free. Now, that type of behavior has not been most people's experience with food and water throughout history. But because of technology and hoarding, we aren't really concerned about having enough food on a daily basis. But if or when you're suddenly at a place where you really don't know where your next meal is coming from, well, all of your priorities suddenly change. Suddenly you have the ability to be laser focused and you have the motivation to pick up that bow and arrow and go try and kill something to eat for dinner. Now, when Jesus says, "Give us today our daily bread," I don't think he's talking primarily about physical food. I think he's using it as an illustration. See, it would behoove us to start to think and to behave with more of a daily bread mentality, if you will, especially when it comes to what we need to thrive spiritually. See, we've all heard pastors use the illustration about just coming to church, to a church gathering, once a week to feed our spiritual man. And then we kind of starve ourselves all week until the next Sunday. And we say that as an illustration to try and help people understand the importance of daily spiritual nourishment. And that is a good illustration, but it never seems to have the intended effect. Most people just kind of smile and nod and say, "Amen, Pastor," and then they just kind of go right back into whatever their regular routine was. Now, why is that? It's because we don't think daily. See, we think weekly, we think monthly, we think quarterly or annually. And while that seems to make sense and is a necessity in today's world, that by no means makes it something that we should assume replaces the biblical example that we're to follow. You know why you might have bought extra toilet paper or maybe hoarded when the fear pandemic hit? You were preparing for next week. You weren't thinking daily. Now, I'm not teaching or condoning that you do or think about absolutely nothing except what's happening or what might happen today. I mean, honestly, I'm already prepared to travel to North Idaho this Thanksgiving to visit Ashley's family. And I can't just wake up, the day that it's time to fly and try and buy a ticket and expect that to work out. See, because we live in a sinful, a disconnected from God world, our hand is kind of forced to not live one day at a time. But remember, in the Garden of Eden, before sin came into the picture, life was just about waking up and just spending time with God. God took care of all of the tomorrows, and all we had to do was think about our today. Now, when you have a bad day, I'm willing to bet that the things that ruin your day are all, or if not mostly, things that you think might happen in the future. some project that needs to get done in 2 weeks and you're behind, stuff like that. Or your kids, they're not doing their homework. That may seem like a today problem, but really, you're only bothered by it because of how their laziness is going to affect their SATs and it's going to prevent them from getting into some Ivy League school or whatever, right? That's how we think. And this is why Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, verse 34, he said, "Don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Today's trouble is enough for today." Living with a daily bread mindset, it isn't easy. It goes against culture. It goes against your fleshly way of thinking. It's not popular, and it will never be automatic to you. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So let me challenge you with this one simple thought that might help you get a little better understanding of this daily bread life mentality. And that's simply this: the important is greater than the urgent. Now answer this for me. What do you think is the most important thing that you could do tomorrow? Jesus kind of answered that question for us when someone asked him, "What's the most important commandment?" And Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself." The most important thing that you or I can do today is to love God and to love people. And you can't do that without spending time with them, without being involved in their lives. Your time with God in the Word is more important than you showing up at work on time. Your time with your spouse is more important than you going grocery shopping. See, your work or grocery shopping, those things are urgent, is what they are. But that doesn't make them important. Now, getting to work on time is important in its own right, but when we attribute an urgency to something, that doesn't make it important. The most important things in life are never urgent. Important things don't demand attention, they desire attention. So make a list this evening about what are the most important things that need to be a part of your daily disciplined routine. It won't be a long list. Then make sure that you do those things before you get sucked into all of the urgent things that pop up and prevent you from accomplishing what is the most important thing in your life. Live with a daily bread mentality. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how God will step in and get his hand involved in all of the urgent things that have been sucking the peace and the joy out of your life.